Welcome to Raving Ryan. I'm your host, Ryan Anastasio. Today I have a very special guest, United States Senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy. Senator, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm very privileged to finally be on your show.
Yeah, I want to start off with a question. A senator is in a very elite position in the United States government, but we know you served in the General Assembly and in the House of Representatives prior to becoming a senator. But can you tell us a little bit about your path to becoming a senator and some of the challenges you faced?
Well, I was a political activist when I was your age. I was organizing kids in my school to try to make the rules in middle school and high school fair. I was trying to help organize river cleanups for the river that I grew up next to. And so I always loved trying to motivate people to collective action, to do something better for their community. And so I've been interested in politics since I was a teenager. I ran for the state legislature when I was 24 years old, just out of college. And I really believed at that time in things like universal health care, in a higher minimum wage, and I was elected very young to the state legislature. And I've just had amazing opportunities since then. I've served in sort of every legislative body you can imagine, from the state level to the federal level, and now I get to represent the whole state of Connecticut, my dream job to be in the United States Senate. It's not easy. I mean, I've always been the youngest person in whatever legislative body I've been in, so I've always had a lot of naysayers who thought that I didn't have enough experience or that I had to wait my turn, but they were all wrong. If you have a fire in your belly and some good ideas, you can make a difference no matter how old you are.
And now I want to move into some questions about some Connecticut politics. Earlier this year, General Electric, one of the world's largest corporations, announced it is moving from Fairfield to Boston. This is a huge loss for the state, and at least they're not moving to another country. But GE left. But what do you think the state needs to do to make sure other businesses don't leave?
Well, I think GE's senior leadership leaving was a big blow for the state. Obviously, they're an iconic company that was incredibly important to our state. But it's important to remember that most of GE stayed. So about 200 people went to Boston, but many more than that stayed in Connecticut. And they actually just bought a whole new property in Shelton, Connecticut, and are expanding. I think the GE was caught by surprise by some of the changes in the state budget that were done in Hartford, and hopefully Hartford has learned some lessons about trying to give a little bit of advance notice and predictability to companies about changes that may be coming. I think GE was interested in getting closer to urban areas and cities where more young people are, and if there's any lesson out of this, it's got to be that for Connecticut to survive, we've got to be attractive to young people, to young engineers, to young scientists, to young entrepreneurs. That's why GE went to Boston, because there's more young people there than there are in Fairfield, Connecticut. I just came from a manufacturing company here in Bristol that is growing by leaps and bounds, and they're hiring every young engineer they can get their hands on coming out of Yukon and central Connecticut. So I think GE's leaving was certainly a wake-up call to us. We've had a lot more good news than bad news when it comes to jobs in the state in the last year, and we've just got to get better at trying to keep some of these young innovators in the state.
And I want to move into a question now facing our nation. Nothing has been done since the devastating shooting in Orlando that has left 50 people dead. Do you think anything will ever get done in Congress?
I do, Ryan. I really do. And obviously, as someone who's from a state where some awful shootings have taken place, Sandy Hook, Bridgeport's shooting that happened just a week ago, I wake up every day trying to shake my colleagues into doing something about the epidemic of gun violence. I just don't think there can be 90% of the American public on one side believing that we should have more background checks before people buy guns and Congress not act. I just don't think the democracy allows that to happen for too long. So I'm not sure when we're going to be able to beat the gun lobby. Maybe it's not next year, but it's soon. I'm confident of it. I see more people around this country rallying to trying to change our gun laws than ever before. And again, it's not controversial. Having people prove that they're not a criminal or seriously mentally ill before they buy a gun, or on a terrorist watch list before they buy a gun, it's not controversial anywhere except for the United States Congress. And I think we'll figure that out over time.
And in June, you stood on the floor for 15 hours trying to get the Senate to vote to not let people on terror watch lists buy guns. The vote did not pass in the Senate, but why do you think the vote didn't pass? And it seems as like a simple thing that should pass in the Senate to me.
I think, and of course, it's simple to 90 some odd percent of Americans. The idea is pretty simple. If you are on a terrorist watch list, which means you can't fly on a plane, then you're on the no-fly list, then you're probably too dangerous to go buy an assault weapon. The gun lobby has a lot of power in Washington, and for a long time, a lot of Republicans have been really fearful of crossing the gun lobby because they thought they'd pay a political price. The good news is that after that initial vote failed, a bunch of Republicans and Democrats got together and crafted a compromise measure. Now, the NRA and the gun lobby still hated that compromise, but for the first time in the wake of the filibuster, more and more Republicans showed a willingness to break from the gun lobby. And I think you'll see that they won't pay a political price this fall, and that will mean that more Republicans will be interested in working with us next session. So this is a long process, much longer than I would like it to be. But even though that bill closing what we call the terror gap failed, I still think some of the compromises that happen will help us get it passed.
And speaking of the filibuster, what was it like, talking for this long? And did you get breaks for like eating food and going to the bathroom?
I learned all the rules of the filibuster. So no, you can't go to the bathroom. You really aren't supposed to eat. You can't even leave your place. One time, about 10 hours into the filibuster, I decided to go for a walk around the Senate chamber, and the parliamentarian flagged me down and told me that I had to go back and stand at my seat, stand in front of my seat. No, I was glad that my body held up and that I was able to stand there without eating or drinking or going to the bathroom for 15 hours. But I had a lot of help. You know, part of what got me through is that about 40 senators came down to the floor. You know, none of them knew it was, or very few of them knew it was happening beforehand. And they asked me questions, which are allowed under the rules. The questions became longer and longer and longer. A few of the questions were 20 minutes or a half an hour. And even though I couldn't sit or leave the chamber during those questions, it definitely gave me a little time to at least rest my voice.
Yeah. And the United States just marked 15 years since the terrorist attack, 9/11, that left almost 3,000 people dead, and it affected people in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and all over the globe. New safety measures were put in planes and travel, but do you think the people of America are safer now than they were then?
I do think they're safer than they were then. That kind of coordinated attack, which involved cells of individuals talking to each other, coordinating with entities outside of the United States, that couldn't happen today in the same way because through the Patriot Act and other mechanisms, we have ways to find bad guys when they're involved in these kind of sophisticated attacks. The problem, as you know, Ryan, is that today these attacks are often totally unsophisticated, often unplanned, these lone wolves who just decide to go out and start shooting without any coordination. Those are harder to stop. But we are undoubtedly safer from the kind of major coordinated attack using airplanes, for instance, that we saw on September 11th.
And ISIS has been doing lots of attacks. Do you have a plan to stop that?
Well, I mean, ISIS is much weaker today than they were. Their recruitment is down, their funding is down. We are slowly strangling this terrorist organization. The problem is that because they're losing ground in places like Iraq and Syria, they're putting more emphasis on trying to get these lone wolf attackers to open up fire in crowded places. We'll beat ISIS, no doubt about it. They are every single day getting weaker. But again, it's not something that can happen overnight. And I think we learned our lessons from the Iraq War. We could go and defeat ISIS in a matter of 30 days if the U.S. Army moved into Syria and Iraq. But that would just be a temporary victory. We're using local forces to beat ISIS. Even though that takes longer, the victory will be longer lasting.
And I'm going to move into a question about the 2016 election. The election has been very interesting this year. I know you've endorsed Hillary Clinton, but can you tell me some things you dislike and like about the two candidates?
Well, Ryan, you might have heard I walked across the state of Connecticut over my August recess, and I spent 6 days on foot talking to hundreds and hundreds of people here in Connecticut, and they're all pretty disgusted by this election. And I think they're more disgusted with Trump than they are with Clinton, but they just feel like the whole election is about attacks and negativity, and they want this election to be about ideas. And so I guess my frustration is the same as theirs. I think it's so silly that we're talking about emails and walls and pneumonia, right? People want to talk about jobs and schools and national security, and I just wish we were able to talk about real issues.
And in this election, both candidates have very high disapproval ratings. In the next several weeks, what do you think the candidates can do to earn people's votes around in Connecticut and around the nation?
Well, I think they've got to talk about what they're for. I think they've got to talk about their plans to change things. What I love about Hillary Clinton is she's got some real aggressive plans to make this country better. I care deeply about improving our mental health system, and she's got a very specific plan to make our mental health system. Donald Trump doesn't have a single plan to make this country better. But I think voters have to sort of look themselves in the mirror as well. It's not just by chance that these candidates spend lots of times on negative attacks. They know that voters respond more often to the negative attacks than they do to positive statements. They also know that more people will click on stories that are about something ridiculous Donald Trump did than they will click on stories about a new policy proposal that Hillary Clinton has on fixing our campaign finance system. So if voters really want these elections to be positive, then they should stop clicking on stories that are negative. They should reward candidates who are positive. And I'll be honest, that doesn't always happen in these elections.
Yeah, you learned this from the 2012 election when Lyndon McMahon spent hundreds of $millions against you, but he still won. So currently the Republicans have 54 seats in the Senate. The Democrats, the Republicans have 54, the Democrats have 44, and there's 2 independents. The Senate races are projected to be very close this year. Experts are saying that the Democrats can take over the Senate. The experts are saying it, but do you think it will happen?
I think there's a better than 50-50 chance the Democrats are going to win the Senate. But if you look at all these races, the close ones today, which are in places like New Hampshire or Pennsylvania or Florida, they're all what we'd call toss-up races. It's all, these polls are 41, 43, 49, 47. It's going to be very, very close. I think we've got some great candidates that are running, and of course it matters. It doesn't look like we're going to get a Supreme Court nominee across the finish line this year. So the next Senate is going to decide, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 nominees to the Supreme Court. So who controls the Senate really does matter.
And what would it mean to you to be in the majority party again?
Well, I would definitely be able to do better things for the state of Connecticut. I would be the chairman of probably 2 subcommittees. Probably most important to Connecticut, I would be the chairman of a subcommittee on the Appropriations Committee, which writes all the checks to all the programs that help make Connecticut work. So I would certainly be in a better position to win funding and grants and legislative victories for Connecticut if we were in the majority.
And like you said before, this summer you walked across the whole state of Connecticut. You started in Rhode Island, near Rhode Island border, and walked all the way down to Greenwich. It took you 6 days. But can you tell us what you gained for the walk personally and professionally?
Well, the first thing that I gained that I didn't expect was weight. I actually gained weight as I walked, and I have no idea why it is, but I think it's because I ate my way across the state. So the state has great restaurants, as you know, and so I just sort of planned my stops for breakfast, lunch, and dinner based on where the best places to eat were. But I learned some things about the state. I knew that there was this crisis of what we call the working poor out there, people who are working full-time but still not able to pay their bills. But I saw them and talked to them all across this walk. And of course, I've met these individuals and families before, but it was just so alarming to me that everywhere I went, from the rich towns to the poor towns, I was meeting people who told me, I'm working 35 hours, I'm working 50 hours, and I still can't buy enough food to fill up my kids' lunch boxes. And so it motivated me coming off this walk to really think more about how we can increase wages for people that already are working.
Yeah. And I want to finish with some personal questions.
Sure.
I know a lot of people want to know what you do in your free time and some of your hobbies. Can you tell us that?
Yeah, well, I have 2 little kids, and so my hobbies are kind of whatever my kids' hobbies are these days. Because I spend so much time away from my kids doing this job, when I'm with them, really want to do whatever they're into. So for my kids, for my oldest kid, that's robotics. He's a big robotics guy. For my youngest guy, he's into running around the backyard playing baseball. We do a lot of hiking as a family. My wife and I were both big outdoors people when we were younger, and we're getting our family into hiking and into camping. It's helping my kids with homework. It's reading to them. So, my free time right now with 2 young kids is really spent doing whatever they want to do.
And can you tell us what are your average days like in Congress?
It's peripatetic, to use a big vocabulary word. are moving constantly from place to place. So when I'm in Washington, I probably have 15 to 20 appointments a day with people from Connecticut that are visiting, with representatives of groups that I believe in. And then in between, I'm stopping in committee meetings. I'm going down to the floor to vote. I'm on the phone with my staff in Connecticut trying to work out issues back home. When I'm here in Connecticut, I'm just traveling the state all day. I have an office in Hartford, but I barely ever see it because I'm just visiting schools, businesses, civic groups, churches. I'm trying to get around the state to meet with people to find out what they want me to be doing as much as I can.
Connecticut is very well known for its pizza. Some people may call Connecticut pizza heaven. What is your favorite pizza restaurant in the state?
So my favorite pizza restaurant in the state is Rossini's Pizza, which is a local spot in Cheshire. So we love Rossini's Pizza. New Haven, everybody always asks me if I'm a Sally's or a Pepe's guy. They're both great, but I actually like modern pizza, which is similar style pizza. It's a little bit off of Worcester Square. And so in the New Haven Pizza Wars, I'm a modern guy. Overall, I like my hometown pizza, Rossini's.
And any toppings you like?
I'm not really a believer that vegetables should be on any pizza. So I really object to the idea of any vegetables on pizza. I like meat. I like pepperoni, sausage, bacon, ham, whatever you want to put that's meat-based, I'll eat it on pizza.
Senator Murphy, in 2018, you're going to be up for election, and there's an election for governor. Would you consider running for governor, or do you just want to keep on staying as a senator?
I wouldn't. I really love this job, and Ryan, we were talking a little bit earlier about the things I've run for in the past. I really have moved pretty quickly, through a bunch of different jobs, in part because I always saw an opportunity to get to a position where I could fight harder for the things that I care about. This is my dream job. It's funny, when you get to this job, I've realized everybody wants to know what you're doing next. I'm not doing anything next. I want to be a great United States Senator. I want to get better at this job. I want to learn the state better than I do now, and hopefully have a legacy in this job that I can be proud of. And I have young kids too, so this is a time for me to kind of settle down. My reelection won't be easy, but I'm not interested in running for anything else.
And Senator Murphy, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on. And I'd also like to thank a lot of Senator Murphy's staff that went into this. And I'd like to thank my brother Sam, who does all the production work. Please subscribe, and if you're, you can go to ravingryan.com to watch this. Like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anything. Reporting for Raving Ryan, I'm Ryan Anastasio.